Big Noon Kickoff is headed to Penn State. Big Noon Saturday is headed to Penn State. Gus, Ginny, and I have the monster this weekend as Ryan Day and the Ohio State Buckeyes travel to take on the undefeated Penn State Nittany Lions and James Franklin. To say that these two coaches need this win is an understatement. Both of these coaches need this win, Ryan Day and James Franklin. I think that both of these coaches are under an immense amount of pressure because a loss in this game is just going to send them in the spiral of the narrative that their fan base likes to perpetuate, which is that each of them can't win the big game. So here we have a top 5 matchup. This is where Franklin has struggled with Penn State. And candidly, this is where Ryan Day has fallen a bit short for Ohio State at times. Okay, so this idea that you're just going to be dominant in top 5 matchups, I don't think is founded in realism. I don't think it's realistic. And I think that the narratives perpetuated about some of these guys that get into these matchups and then maybe don't win over 50% or aren't over 500 in these, like, oh, they can't win the big game. That's not necessarily the case. The fact that they're constantly in these games, I think, is a testament to how good of a coach they are. And that is the same for James Franklin as well as Ryan Day. Now, as we get into the game, we don't know exactly who's going to play quarterback for Penn State. That's still a bit up in the air. So Drew Allar left that Wisconsin game last week, and he was banged up with a lower body injury, and Beau Pribula came into that game and played really well. Pribula stepped in, and he's a guy that he's not a novice on the field by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, during the course of this season, Andy Kotelnicki, their offensive coordinator, whether it's between, I would say, 3 to 8 times per game, is going to put Pribula in the game. Now, he's not sitting back there just running the offense, orchestrating the passing game. He comes in to serve a specific role, generally speaking, when Allar is healthy, and that role is to provide some level of spark and conflict in the run game. And he's been able to do that very well. Now, in the second half against Wisconsin, in a game that let's face it, Penn State was struggling in just a little bit, Pribula came in and played really well with the entire offense at his disposal. And I think that it at least gives credence to the thought that Beau Pribula could be a better option this week against Ohio State. More on that in a little bit. Will be a game time decision. James Franklin should absolutely not announce the starter because these two guys are so different in their approach. The style of quarterback that Drew Allar is and the style of quarterback that Beau Pribula is vastly different. And so you don't want to name a starter, and you don't want even to allude to who's going to play, because the game plan defensively for Jim Knowles and the defense for Ohio State is going to look different based on the guy that ends up starting. So absolutely drag it out. This is exactly what he should be doing. Now, on the flip side, the quarterback for Ohio State, Will Howard, I think it's a great story this week because here's a guy that grew up in Pennsylvania and desperately wanted to play at Penn State his entire life. Like, I love that storyline. In a lot of ways, it reflects my own career path. I desperately wanted to play at Colorado State. Never got recruited by Colorado State. So when I got to play them, once I was at the University of Colorado, I was like, man, there's nothing I want more than to beat that team. 3-0, by the way, but don't worry about it. It's not like I still remember it into my 40s, but whatever. That's all good. Will Howard is returning home, though, and now this is a game that he will clearly remember because, again, grows up in Pennsylvania and wants to play at Penn State, doesn't get the chance. They didn't feel like he was good enough to be recruited, and they're recruiting at the top end, and that's totally their prerogative. But as a player, that is a highly motivating thing. Now, I will tell you, being motivated as a quarterback, you know what that gets you? Nothing. It gets you nothing. You've got to play incredibly well in terms of the details of the system, the rhythm of the system, the connectivity to the system. And if he's able to do that, then they should play well. The biggest question for me in this game, though, is still going to be the Ohio State offensive line, even more so than the quarterback question marks for Penn State. The offensive line issues for Ohio State are real. We saw that come to fruition a week ago against Nebraska. They had their starting left tackle, Josh Simmons, who was playing to, I think, at least top 2-round draft pick style football, level football. He goes down against Oregon, and ever since he went down, they just have not been right in the run game. It's been a problem. They tried to go with Zen Mahalski at left tackle and leave Donovan Jackson, a natural guard, at his spot. He's an All-American. They tried to leave him at guard, left guard. It didn't work. Okay, Zen Mahalski did not play very well. I understand that like he's a good program player, but it did not work against Nebraska. They couldn't protect very well and they couldn't run the football. He goes down, and then all of a sudden Luke Montgomery comes in, which was to be honest, a huge surprise to me. I did not expect Luke Montgomery to go in the game at guard, and Donovan Jackson bumped out. The reason I did not expect Luke Montgomery is because Austin Saraveld had started at left guard for an injured Donovan Jackson earlier in the year. Now we're getting in the weeds here with the offensive line, but again, it speaks to the question marks at that group. What in the world is Ohio State going to get out of the 5 guys up front? That is a major question. I don't even think they know what they're going to get. And now they're going to have to deal with the crowd noise at Happy Valley. They're going to have to deal with the pass rush and that athletic, aggressive defensive front. So advantage Penn State when it comes to that. And I think that it's actually going to put a lot of pressure, not just in terms of what the defense can put on Will Howard, but also just what he has to put on himself. I believe that Ohio State is going to have to throw the football early in this game to help protect the offensive line. Normally, you talk about let's run the football in order to throw the football later. I think it's going to be opposite for Penn State and Ohio State more specifically. For Ohio State, I looked at last year's game. I'm watching that film, and you know what Ohio State did? They leaned in to Marvin Harrison. He touched the ball 3, 4, 5 times early in the first couple of possessions, and they did that because I don't feel like they felt real comfortable blocking Chop Robinson and Abdul Carter. Now they've got Abdul Carter and a game time decision denied Dennis Sutton. What is the game plan going to look like depending on those 5 guys up front? And for me, I do think that it's going to have to be kind of a Will Howard game early, a Jeremiah Smith game early, and a Mecca Ibuka game early. They're going to have to throw the football because I don't see a scenario where they're able to just go in there and run the ball dominantly. They have not done it in the last 6 quarters. They ran the football for 2.1 yards per carry last week against Nebraska, and they only threw the ball 4 times to Jeremiah Smith. That has to be rectified, okay? If you look at the Oregon game in a matchup-style game, which this is a matchup-style game, Smith got, 10 targets. Well, that's going to have to repeat itself against Penn State, in particular on the road. Think of the game 2 years ago in Happy Valley when Ohio State went in there. How did they win that game? JT Tuimoloau went absolutely crazy on the defensive side, and Marvin Harrison was the threat offensively. So I think that the wide receivers are going to have to really step up, and they're going to have to throw the football quite effectively against this Penn State defense. That leads us to the Penn State offense. Obviously, the questions at quarterback, and that's going to affect the style with which they're trying to attack the Ohio State defense. Now, based on the way that Ohio State played Nebraska after the loss to Oregon, you saw a lot more aggressive defense. You saw a lot more blitzing, stunts, man-to-man coverage, single coverage on the outside. I firmly believe that Pribula gives you a better option against that style of defense. The reason is because in man coverage, the player that can get lost in man coverage is the quarterback, unless you're spying him. And if you just spy him with one defender, it's not great leverage to only spy with one defender. It's very easy for a quarterback, in particular of his athletic capability, Pribula's, to run away from that defender, unless it's maybe like Caleb Downs that's coming in and spying. But if you run man, there's a good chance that the quarterback's going to have the ability to create explosive plays with his legs. And that's exactly what Penn State would love to do with an athletic quarterback in Pribula that really goes in now to create explosive plays with his legs. This is a fascinating matchup, and everything right now pointing me to be like, Penn State is an underdog in this game, but man, like this feels like a matchup that's starting to favor them, because of the injuries to the offensive line and because Beau Pribula and his skill set, I think is better suited to face a defense that clearly now wants to be aggressive and run man coverage. Going to be a great game. I cannot wait. Big noon kickoff is going to be there. We will be there. Everyone's going to be there. Every pregame show is going to be there. Apparently, both presidential candidates are going to be there. So I might have to sleep in the booth, because once those, the dignitaries come out, like you can't move around. Everyone's just like freeze until they leave. So good chance I'm not catching a flight after the game, which is fine because the game should be incredible, and I can't wait for it. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.